This is a very timely presentation about the impact of what is now the most powerful black swan event in modern history. Not since the World Wars has our country faced such an incredible challenge, right? This presentation, critical knowledge, it's not Netflix binge watching. I'm not here to scare you, but the fact that you're in this webinar means that you're concerned about the effects of coronavirus on the economy and on your own wealth. You want data. And more importantly, you want ideas on how you can safeguard your assets. And that is what this is all about. So welcome, let's get started. Super quick intro on me. I'm a guy that is super relieved that he has no investments in the stock markets or in hotels or airlines in particular. Anna and I live on the quiet little apartment real estate side of the pond, where the investing is not as sexy or as addictive as the stock markets or startups. But boy, we're both super happy today to be on the to be the slow and steady turtles, not the speedy rabbits. So here's some of our apartment and self-storage communities. When Anna and I look at this portfolio today, we thank ourselves for being in an industry where we've got the cash flow to cushion the sharp pain that is about to come. Now, we've been checking our community's cash flow, especially Anna, and many of them can pay a year of mortgage even if their rents fall more than 50%, and we're not predicting that they will fall that much. And this gives us a tremendous sense of belief that when we ignored high-flying stock markets that seem to go up 30% a year without any effort, and instead invested in super boring apartments, we did the right thing. We made the right call, and our investors will be able to sleep at night knowing that our tenants still need a roof over their head. But before we get to the content, here's the really boring stuff that our lawyer forces upon you. This is an educational webinar. It doesn't squeeze out the risk in real estate investing. Recommendations are not magic. They're opinions. Do your own due diligence. Consult professionals. You can still lose money. All right. Lawyer's happy. So here's the agenda slide, and as you can see, it's already getting decimated. So the first section of our presentation is no longer relevant. So we're going to move straight to the second section, which is the impact on your life. You know, we're going to talk about the possibilities of full lockdown or not. As you know, 21 states at this point in lockdown. We're going to talk about that. And once again, this headline is irrelevant. Is a recession coming? Is not relevant anymore. The question is, how much of a recession do we get? Is it V-shaped? Is it U-shaped? How damaging is it? How long does it last? That's really the question that we're asking ourselves. A new section that was added in today is economy versus the people, right? So we've got $2 trillion stimulus package, and we're going to talk about the impact, the relief for households, the relief for small businesses, for real estate people, and then lifelines for major corporations. We're going to get the opinions of people in real estate, and boy, I have to tell you, all of the opinions from last week have proven to be invalid just by Friday of this week. So it's stunning how things are changing. We're going to talk just for a while about the impact on hotels and Airbnb, because this is an industry that is not being hit. It has been demolished. So we're going to talk about that. And then we are going to finish off with talking about the impact to the stock market. And we're going to talk about some winners and losers, because, hey, there's some interesting things going on in the stock market. There's companies down 78%, which don't make sense because they're falling along with everybody else. So we'll share some tips there. And then we'll finish off with asset management. What are we doing to protect our communities and investors? And this section, by the way, is changing all the time. Every day we're rewriting this section. And so the best practices that industry experts are implementing is also changing every single day. So here we go, slide 20, because the first 19 are gone. Impact on your life, right? So let's start with this section that we're going to focus on quarantine. As you know, Multifamily University, we attract data and analytics-driven investors. So I think that this section will make a lot of sense. It's just quick, it's a few slides. Here's a worldwide infection board, and I didn't get the time to update this, but to be honest, nothing has really changed. All that's happened is that the numbers have gotten really, really scary, with the US in the mid 80,000 infection rate. And here's my message. A lot of people think that the US doesn't need to go into full-scale quarantine. A lot of people think that we are doing better than Italy, which is nonsense at this point in time, because the data does not support that. We have more cases than Italy. And take a look at how well Italy has done, because they have a military-driven quarantine. Take a look at our average daily growth rate. I can tell you that if you continue along this rate, If the US continues along this rate, by the end of April, 2/3 of America will get infected, and there'll be no less than 10 million deaths in the US. No less than 10 million. Now take a look at how Italy is doing. We tend to consider Italy to be a huge human tragedy. Let's not worry about them. This up here, we are a huge human tragedy. It's just our dead are not dead yet. They're going to be in a few days. You're starting to see New York. You're about to see 6 or 7 New Yorks. This is the bottom line. It's here. We're no different. If anything, we are the worst in this list. I mean, if you think that the United Kingdom wasn't doing well, they're at 20% average daily growth rate. Germany, 17. South Korea, 1%. The United States, the worst in the world. So
we're likely going to top 100,000 today, Neal.
That's right. We might hit 100,000 cases today. And you know what's interesting is if you look at this, this is about 3 days old. Look at how quickly this grows. When I was on a plane with Anna, we had 124 cases.
Yep.
And when I was telling Anna this, she was like raising her eyebrows, but I was like, well, I'm doing exponential math. The problem is human beings do not understand exponential math. Look at how shallow it is. Case, cluster, cluster, boom. And now we're in the boom mode where we get 15, 20,000, 30,000 cases every single day. The problem is the growth rate. The growth rate has to slow down at this point. We have to slow it down over the next few weeks if we do not want something that doesn't even have a parallel in history. Even World War II may not be a parallel. Some states are doing much better than others. 200 million people are now in lockdown. 21 states, 14 major cities, 47 counties for states that haven't gone into lockdown. So yes, it's working. It's beginning to work. We are beginning to see a slowdown. The problem is the US is a country of 332 million people, and there's 132 million people that are not in lockdown in any way. Look at the white sections of this map that are unfortunately going to be reinfecting the rest of us. So it is extraordinarily challenging. Here's another look at infection rates. This is the US. We cannot afford to have another month at 20 or 30% infection rates. The problem is this line, this dotted line is showing that our infection rate is still growing. And you might think, oh no, it's dropping now. I assure you, I look at these rates every single day. I get up in the morning, before I go to bed, I look at them. The last 3 days have all been higher than this 25%. They're up here, including a day in the 40%. So this dotted line, if I were to update it to March 27th, it would be sharper upwards. Here's Italy. This is what happens when an entire country goes into a complete shutdown. This is what's necessary, because if we stay at this rate, let alone go up sharper, we're looking at tens of millions of deaths. That's what the data is showing. And this is not a political issue. This has nothing to do with Democrats versus Republicans. It has nothing to do with whether you like President Trump or not. It has everything to do with the fact that the math shows that the United States, yellow line, is the sharpest growing in the world. Everyone else is less sharp than us. And there are countries doing so much better. South Korea, Japan, Singapore. But do you see any countries on this map doing worse than the United States? Not one single country doing worse than us. All right, so as I said, is a recession coming is no longer a headline. We're really going to talk about how deep a recession are we talking about at this point. Green Street advisors were quick out of the gate. They were the first to warn that the economic impact is going to be massive. And they also said that there would be geopolitical ripple effects, like a lower probability of a second term for President Trump, and also a turmoil in the oil market. And we're already seeing, oil fall to stunning levels. And then these guys from Goldman Sachs, boy, they have had to eat their words. They first came out with, oh, it's going to be a sharp deterioration in economic activity in just March and April. Q2 GDP will not be hit much. We're thinking 4 to 5%. Here's where they are 1 week later. 1 week later. They now forecast that Q2 GDP will be minus 24%.
Whew.
Just as a benchmark, the third quarter of 2008 was minus 8%, and that is the most we've ever seen decline in a single quarter. Their forecast is triple. Morgan Stanley, quadruple that number. So this is like nothing we've ever seen before. I almost find that looking at the past is not relevant because we've never had a true black swan event like this.
No.
Unemployment, we were at 3.5% in Feb. Goldman Sachs thinks 9%. Morgan Stanley thinks that we're going to be at 12.8%. So stunning, stunning numbers, right? So I'm going to go for a second. I'm going to pause this and point out that the jobless claims came in. Look at this chart. Do you see this line on the right? This blue line here? That's last week. And this is the last 50 years. So back in 1982, I think it's this one right here, we had a month with 660,000 people that applied. We just had 3.3 million people apply. And because the new stimulus bill changes this graph itself, we can now have the gig economy, people that are contractors, independent workers, they can also apply. By next week, expect to see a bar that is larger than this. So not only is this 5 times higher than what we've seen in history, expect that next week, if the gig economy people are allowed to also apply for unemployment and we can get the bill passed this week, the bar may actually be larger than this week. So this is like nothing we've seen before. So here's a paradigm shift that I want to tell you about. This is not not like 2008, not like 2001. It is not like any event we've ever had. Think of this as a Category 6 hurricane. And this Category 6 hurricane is simultaneously striking 196 countries across the world and shutting down, completely shutting down the United States economy and the world economy at this point, with China being the only exception. It's the only economy that's open for business. But you know how they're getting hurt? All of their job orders are getting canceled. So you might think that the Chinese are like, okay, we're opening our economy up, but they're an export economy. Well, if all of the orders that were coming in get canceled, is the Chinese economy really open? So I'm going to skip past this particular video because I think I've made my point with the 3.3 million. And a lot of it is just layoffs, right? Crazy numbers of layoffs. 18% of households in the US affected, 18 million jobs affected already in American industries. Take a look at the restaurant industry in major US cities. And this, by the way, works everywhere in the world. So on the 1st of March, very, very little impact to open table reservations. This is the open table network for restaurants. So we've gone from a 0% impact down to 100% impact. So open table today has no reservations anywhere in the US. In fact, they've been saying that there are very few reservations anywhere in the world. So full shutdown, these are the top industries that are impacted. Hospitality down 80+%, travel and tourism down 95%, retail chains pretty much closed, so at 100%. And then if you thought that was the bad news, here's what the Federal Reserve of the United States is saying. The US could rocket to 30% unemployment. And this is, of course, their highest number. So keep that in mind. This is the worst case number. The US could rocket to 30% unemployment next quarter as it rages. And when they say next quarter, they actually mean Q2, because we're about to get into the next quarter. And they're saying that GDP in the US could plunge by 50%. Remember, our previous record holder before was 2008 at 8%. We could see GDP drop 50%. And I'm beginning to see the stock market understand that. I could not understand why the stock market had such huge increases in the first 4 days of this week. And now they're beginning to understand that while the stimulus being provided and the work that the Fed is doing is important, the size of this is worldwide. It's affecting the world economy. So makes no sense for the stock market to be going up. So now today, I think the stock market's down about 60 or 600 points at this point in time as they begin to take in the damage that is being done on the unemployment side. So what does this mean? There are 2 scenarios, and I'm so pleased to say that a week ago, I was terrified that we were going to be scenario 1. And scenario 1 is truly world ending, but today we're leaning more towards scenario 2. And scenario 1 is that we don't go into shutdowns in the US, that we don't shut down our entire economy. We try and do containment, we try and do care. We currently have 29 states doing containment and care and 21 that have shut down, but that changes every day. So in this scenario, we don't do a 50-state quarantine. We do only a local. People are still traveling. Just so you know, our airports are open. But this morning, the TSA announced that traffic in airports is down 92%. So even though 29 states are open, they're not in shelter in place, traffic has decreased by 92%, which is why I'm more bullish on what's happening with scenario 2. So in scenario 1, 40% to 70% of the US population becomes infected over the next 12 to 8 months. And we've actually been doing something that I want to show you that I would urge those of you that are interested to go to this website called coronavirusrealestate.com and then scroll down on this website. There's lots of great stuff if you're in real estate, but I want you to scroll down to this infection rate data. So me and my assistants are actually maintaining this graph. So each day what this graph shows is what is the 5-day daily growth rate in the United States? What is it for Italy? What is it for Spain, South Korea, Iran? Because these people have had national shutdowns, and they started doing shutdowns before us. And you notice that the rate has dropped. Look at Italy, 36% on March 1st, but the last 5 days, 9.6%. So that gives me hope that we're moving in the right direction as long as we keep shutting down the remaining states. Because if we don't, we're all going here, which is 40 to 70% of Americans get infected, and 2.5 million to 8 million Americans die before we start to see the impact of herd immunity. Scenario 2, much more likely now, is that 200 million people in the US are now in quarantine, so similar to Italy. So we see a drop in infection rate, and we're beginning to see that in places like the San Francisco Bay Area. So I did a presentation, this same presentation for a group 2 hours ago, and they had an expert on there that is a actual California infection control expert. And he said, Neal, the Bay Area's rate is much lower than California's, even though California declared quarantine just 6 days after the San Francisco Bay Area. And that gives me a lot of hope. That gives me hope that we're going to see a drop in the infection rate that is similar to China and Hong Kong and Italy and all the other places that are seeing the drops, Iran. And in that case, I think 200,000, unfortunately, is too bullish at this point in time, but we end up with maybe 500,000 infections, and we end up with maybe 15,000, 20,000 deaths. And I know that is an incredible human tragedy, but keep in mind that the flu kills more people. So this scenario is not catastrophic from a healthcare perspective, but it is still very damaging from the perspective of real estate and the economy. Not as much as scenario 1. Because scenario 1 is the deepest depression in history, including 1929's depression. All real estate becomes illiquid, possibly for 5 to 10 years. Dow Jones drops below 10,000 points. All of those, I think, we're moving away from, so I'm very happy to see that. Here, this is now much more likely. We get a very sharp recession. The sharpest recession in history is happening now. We're already in it. Q2 and Q3, we're in recession. We go down some absurd number, and then we see a bounce back, not a move back up, but a bounce back in Q4. We could see benefit from ultra low rates, but not this year. We probably see those benefits in the second half of next year, or possibly in the first half of 2022. We are likely to see price declines in this scenario. So people have been telling me, Neal, there's only 1 month of inventory in the single family market. And my comment is, that doesn't matter, because today there is no possibility of a price decline. Nothing's moving. The markets are frozen. But when we come out of this, I think by August, September, the inventory in the market is going to increase on the single family side. It's going to increase in multifamily. It's going to increase in commercial. So we're going to see some price declines. Some of that is just negative investor sentiment. And some of that is because those companies were not like us. They didn't keep enough operating expenses. And so they couldn't just continue operating through this downturn. And so we have Captain Congress to the rescue. $2 trillion of stimulus. No Congress in history has ever acted this quickly, 15 days ago, there was no talk of this $2 trillion bill. Today, it is going to pass. So, despite all the challenges that come with it, I have to say, good job, Congress. And I have to say, phenomenal job, Federal Reserve. The Fed has basically not just thrown the kitchen sink at this thing, they've gone all over the house, ripped out all the plumbing, and thrown it all at once. We've never seen a Federal Reserve do that. That's because the Fed understands exponential math. They knew that there was no time to do this step by step by step. So they did everything. They fired every single weapon that they had in their guns all at once. So let's take a look at this $2 trillion package and what it means for us, for real estate. The biggest benefit to real estate are these direct payments, right? So if you make less than 99,000 as a single or make less than 198 as a couple, then you get money, right? Cash payments, this is a gift. $1,200 to singles, $2,400 to married couples. If you have 2 kids, you get another $1,000. These direct payments, we know that the biggest beneficiary of direct payments is food. The second biggest beneficiary, I was corrected last night, is not rent. It used to be food, then rent. Now it's food, then Netflix, then rent. So I'm really glad that Netflix is only $10 a month, because it seems that that's more important these days than rent is. But we still come in at number 3. So that's a solid number. A significant portion of this money is going to end up paid out in rent to landlords. So that's very useful. Let's look at the lending programs. They're giving $500 billion to distressed companies, hotels, airlines, cruise lines, national security businesses. This is important because if these don't restart, then this money is only going to help us for a few months. It's going to help us for 2 months. So we need these jobs to come back. So they're giving this money. I don't think they're going to bail out the cruise lines, but I definitely think they're going to bail out the hotels and the airlines. $350 billion is going to small business loans. Now, you are a small business. Do you have an LLC? Do you have a rental home in there? You are a small business. If you don't lay off workers, and if you don't have any workers, then you're good. You can get a loan. We can get a loan. Our apartment communities are below $5 million in revenue. We can get a loan. And so we may take advantage of that, but we actually have other benefits that other industries don't have. We've got benefits in the apartment industry that we're more likely to use. But if we need to, we have $350 billion in loans that we can pick up, and they're very reasonably priced loans. $150 billion is being given to states because states are spending money like water. They're spending money they don't have. Politicians are not eligible for assistance. Student loans are deferred for 6 months, so that's a big yay. And their interest is being waived.
Big yay.
Yeah. So that's huge, right? So we got to help our students at this point. Let's look at foreclosures and eviction protection. So mortgages, you have a single family mortgage, you get 60 days of forbearance without penalty. You can extend that to 120 days. You have a multifamily, you can get 30 days of forbearance, you can extend that to 90 days. Now, you cannot evict or charge any kind of fees for failure to pay rent for 120 days if you want to use this as a single family landlord. If you want to use this as a multifamily site, we're probably going to end up using this. Then you cannot evict people. So for most purposes, we've heard that even if this doesn't apply to your particular landlord or your particular lender, no county in the US currently is doing eviction. So all practical purposes, no one in the United States will get evicted for the months of March, April, May, and June, and possibly beyond that point as well. So this is a big deal for us because they're not giving forbearance to malls. They're not giving forbearance to strip malls. They're not giving forbearance to industrials, but multifamily is receiving in 90 days of forbearance because they do not want us to start evicting people large scale. So once again, a need-based industry always gets benefits that a want-based industry does not. This shows the strength of the real estate because I haven't seen anybody bailing out all of you that have lost 40% in the stock market in the last 30 days. Unemployment insurance is really key. As you know, states give unemployment insurance, but they wait for a week. So the first thing is now there's no 1 week delay. You get unemployed, states start giving you money. But the state money is very small. It's $300 to $500 a week. So what the feds are doing is they're stacking a huge amount of money on top of that $300 to $500 a week. So you can get as much as $4,000 a month on unemployment. And you can get it for as much as 4 months. This is a very, very powerful measure, and I don't think I've seen anything like this before. They're also giving money to the people that are at the front line, the vaccine development people. They're giving money to CDC, to the VA, to FEMA. They're giving money to the airports that are still functioning even though they have no revenue. They're giving $100 billion in public funding for hospitals because they're not allowing elective procedures. So all that cosmetic surgery, all the boob surgeries, those are all gone. But the hospitals are still running 24 hours a day. So $100 billion is being pushed out to the hospitals. This makes so much sense. So it is the largest emergency aid package in US history. Here's what you need to remember. It's already obsolete. So even as it passes, Congress realizes it's too small. So we're going to see another version of this aid package, and you're going to start hearing about that aid package next week. So if you're reading the news, you're going to notice that there's another aid package on the way, because this is a stopgap measure that gets us maybe 20 or 30 days. We'll still crash our economy if we don't do more. So what are people saying about rents? I know a lot of you are curious about rents. So some are saying, yeah, the fact that small businesses can make payroll without losing their employees is great. This is going to give landlords some comfort that their tenants will be able to pay rent eventually. Now, not everyone's in agreement on this, and we'll know more. Marcus and Millichap is in a very bearish mood because they're thinking that there may be a rent strike in the United States. So if, as you know, social media is very infectious, even more so than the coronavirus. And so people are starting to create a rent strike campaigns. And you see this on the left, you see the kind of bitter comments.
Boy,
so watch for
bitter.
this. Yeah, watch for this, because this could turn into a nationwide movement over social media and turn into a nationwide rent strike. So Dana Brody is warning us that a rent strike in the United States coordinated by social media could occur sometime in mid-April. And then, of course, there's the politicians. So on one side, we have basically a single person, one person, who believes that we need to reopen the economy by Easter, which I think is the 12th of April. So that's what his belief is, that we need to reopen the economy. And boy, the backlash from the data people has been intense, absolutely intense, right? So here's a governor from Trump's own party, Mike DeWine. We save our economy by first saving lives. So his own people are not listening to what he's saying. And then this is the CEO of past CEO of Bill Gates, richest man in the world. Bill Gates is known to be a data analytics driven person, and he says it's going to be really difficult to tell people, hey, keep going to restaurants, buy new homes, ignore that massive pile of bodies over in the corner. That is extremely difficult to do. That is extremely difficult to achieve. RSM Analytics is talking about the fact that if we reopen the economy, we massively increase the possibility of a second and a third wave. And so we end up having 3 shutdowns of the economy instead of 1 shutdown. John Hopkins is talking about the fact that if we do this, it's going to be both irresponsible and dangerous. And if we remove restrictions, we will potentially kill millions of people in the year ahead and essentially destroy our economy, not hurt it, but completely demolish the economy altogether. Moody's Analytics is saying that if we do this and the president goes 180 on us and open by Easter, it is the prescription for a depression. The hit to the economy will be far worse than if we currently remain in lockdown. It is an absolutely massive gamble. So all sectors, including the president's own party, talking about how dangerous this is. No other country in the world is currently has a politician saying what our president is saying. So very dangerous. And again, I don't want to make this about politics. Please don't have political comments in the chat. We're not going to answer those. But I think we're just looking at this as one person potentially doing something that no one else in the country agrees on. All right. So, let's hear from all the real estate people about what they're saying about real estate, right? So the first thing that people are pointing out is, yes, we've got lower mortgage rates, but it doesn't matter today. We had crazy low rates in 2008 and helped, but it took a significant amount of time, and everything in this crisis is sped up 10, 20, 30x times. And, in 2008, despite super low rates, it was still a bloodbath for several years. So we see low rates helping the housing market in Q4 or maybe next year, but we don't see them making any impact to the market, a positive impact this year. And PricewaterhouseCoopers agrees with me. Low rates and tight housing inventory will not be enough to shelter the housing industry from the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. CBRE, and here's what's bizarre. I mean, these people have analysts. They're full-time analysts. I'm not a full-time analyst. I'm running an apartment complex portfolio. But these guys, whatever is said on this slides is now completely out of date. And everything I've gathered came from maybe 10 days ago, 7 days ago. All of these numbers are wrong because they have now scheduled webinars. And the ones that I'm seeing, I just saw one earlier today that was our RCLCO. All of these numbers are off, right? So, I mean, imagine how quickly their numbers are off. Early March, they said hotels to suffer a 20% drop in revenue. We all know now that the drop in revenue for hotels is over 80%. So that's how wrong and how ridiculously wrong the analysts are. This is taken from a report that was published on the 7th of March, 20 days ago. And they said 20%. That's how off they are. That's why the stock market beginning to go down today makes sense, because people still haven't figured out how devastating this thing is. So Marcus and Millichap wrote a totally nonsensical, overly bullish report, which they are very much backing off on at this point. And they're, all of these guys have announced new webinars because they think that all of their numbers are wrong, and it sort of makes sense. Yardi was better. First thing they said is, we're going to experience a recession. And then they pointed out that the impact will last 3 to 6 months. Now they're saying 6 months. They also pointed out that multifamily is well capitalized and is strong enough to weather a modest slowdown. The only problem is, in the last week, no one uses this word anymore, modest.
Yeah.
We use words like sharp or sharpest
Shocking.
ever. Shocking. So I think multifamily gets hit. I don't think that there's any asset class in the world that is not going to get hit. So because this is a world recession or depression, depending upon what you want to call it, it certainly meets the criteria for a depression because the numbers are so bad. But if it's fairly short, it's less damaging than past depressions are going to be. So we are talking about short-term rent collection issues. We are getting more guidance from the apartment industry. I saw a webinar earlier today. They're guiding only between 10 and 20% rent loss for April, which I'm quite happy to hear, because other people have told me 30. I've even heard 50% rent loss. I think those numbers are nonsensical.
Not for April. I would say not for April, because April is based on March.
Right. Exactly. So people had money in the bank.
It's May that we
May is kind of all up in the air, but I think that 10 to 20% is certainly a number that we're looking at in terms of rent loss for the month of April.
Agreed.
So they're talking about heavy flexibility with tenants. They're saying value add projects will likely slow. We've already seen that happen. 55% of the deals that were in process were either retraded at lower numbers or got completely canceled. And interest rates in the commercial market spiked. So they spiked up, they went up, all kinds of nonsensical stuff was added in, making deals just not pencil out. So a lot of projects at this point are just falling apart. Now here's something that you already said that I strongly, strongly, strongly believe in. If there's nothing else you remember from this webinar, remember this, that we are going to see a buying opportunity in Q3 and Q4. There will be blood in the water, but it'll be there for a very short amount of time. So you need to be ready. You need to have plenty of powder dry to take advantage of an opportunity. So many of you, and right now, there's 276 of you listening to me. So many of you have kicked yourself for not buying more in 2009 and 2010. Don't make that mistake again. This is extremely powerful. It's extremely short, and we will bounce back. Remember, do you know of one hurricane in history that has had a long-term impact? What about Hurricane Sandy? It demolished parts of New York, but within 45 days, the New York economy came back. This is similar. It's demolished our economy, or in this case, it's shut down our economy, and it's a planned shutdown or deliberate, a forced shutdown. But I also think that the bounce back is much quicker than anything else. If we're going to go down sharper, 3x or 4x, we're also going to recover faster, 3x or 4x. So that's what Yardi is talking about. Now more and more people are taking this stream and saying, yep, that makes perfect sense, that our upswing is going to be very sharp. And so we're going to see some incredible opportunity here in Q3 and Q4. So investors need to be ready and know that they have very little time before the prices readjust. So let's talk about the single family market, right? So we are not seeing as much of an impact yet on the single family market, and that's because, end of March is considered to be the beginning of the home buying season. And so 61% of realtors said sellers had no interest in removing listings. This surprised us. We expected that this number would be much lower. We thought 20% of realtors would say that sellers had no interest in removing listings. So at the current time, what we've seen is that the single family industry has pivoted very quickly to video tours and virtual tours. Customers are still choosing to go into open houses and they wash their hands and they take off their shoes. So we're seeing it slow down, obviously, but we're seeing it a little bit less than we thought so far. So, but we do think that here's what we think is going to happen to the single family market. Sellers are going to be reluctant to list homes. And we'll change this slide in the next week as we get new data from the National Association of Realtors. So far, only 1 in 4 nationwide, and this is data that's 1 week old, are changing how their homes are shown. They're wanting them to come in and wash their hands first, use hand sanitizer, remove their shoes because they're afraid of having strangers in their homes. Home buyers, we think, are going to stop because the stock market correction basically makes them feel less rich. They're going to postpone decisions. They're going to think that interest rates are going to go down, prices are going to go down, and of course they're physically afraid to go to open homes in the marketplace. So I expect that next week my slide here will give you a much higher level of decline of interest than we've seen so far in the single family market. Okay, done with single family. Let's bounce on back over to multifamily, right? So one of the best ways to figure out which sectors of the real estate market will get hurt the most is to look at the REITs, right? The publicly traded real estate investment trusts that specialize in all of the different verticals have been hammered. And this number is no longer 35, it's more like 20, 25% at this point in time because the market's gone back up a little bit. And no surprise, the hardest hit area of the market is senior housing and skilled nursing. If you had an 80-year-old grandma, would you leave her in a senior housing or skilled nursing facility today, knowing that this enemy is wandering the hallways? I wouldn't. And I don't think that I would put them back in there until a vaccine is found. So not only is senior housing and skilled nursing hit, I think that the longest hit, the longest term hit is going to be on this sector. And this sector is going to be counting down the days until a vaccine is found. The next one is lodging. Now, keep in mind that the hit to lodging is more short term. We open the economy, hotels will fill up in 2 weeks. But for the moment, the lodging industry and the gaming industry, which is also a hotel industry, are hit very, very hard. So is student housing, but that's just temporary, right? Once again, same comment, just like hotels. If students go back to school, the student housing industry, why are they worth 30% less? It doesn't make any sense because there's still the same number of students in school. And if this recession costs us 2 million jobs, well, 10% of those people are going to go back to school. So the student housing industry is actually going to see an increase. That's what we saw in 2008. We saw an increase in the number of people that went back to school. So I think that this is extremely temporary. And I think that the moment we reopen the economy, this number is going to bounce back up. So I think that this student housing REITs are actually rather cheap right now. Then in the middle section, which we call the hard hit section, you see the malls and you see the strip centers. Once again, it's very difficult to tell how long they'll be hit. I just have this data to share with you. China is still struggling. So the economy is open, Apple stores are open, malls are open, but people are not going to malls because they're afraid. So even though people are going back to work because they need that money, they're not spending just yet. So keep that data point in mind that malls and strip centers may be hurt for longer than other places like hotels, which rely on a lot of business travelers. Office, right? So at minus 23%, some of you have questioned, why it should be hit this little because, hey, nobody's in offices right now. Yes, but most offices are rented out to companies, not individuals. And as a result, the likelihood that those companies are not going to make their April rent is extremely low. So far, we've heard of a lot of retail players saying, we're not going to make April rent, like Cheesecake Factory, right? Sent out a notice to over 200 malls saying, I'm sorry, we're not going to make our April rent. But not a single company has issued an advisory saying, we're not going to pay rent in April. So I don't think the office sector gets hit that much. And I actually think that the office sector is also a little bit cheap right now and worth looking at buying some of the office sector stock. But I'm going to show you something else that's much more important than the office sector stock. It's a much better deal looking at the least affected section. So apartments are down minus 23%, but now that we have a bill that's passed, I expect that this bar, this minus 23 bar, is going to go minus 19, then minus 15, then minus 10, because now they know that apartments in an indirect way are being bailed out by the taxpayer, right? We're the ones benefiting, not any of these other verticals. So we're likely to see this minus 23 number get much, much smaller. Now, here's something I want to point out. You look at life science and you look at medical office. These are kind of together, right? So this life science is a lot of R&D sort of places, and medical office. I think that these are incredible buys. The big winners from 2001 was the security industry and the technology security industry, which had a 10-year boom. We are predicting that life sciences and medical offices will see a 10-year boom after the coronavirus subsides. There's going to be all kinds of new industries and sub-industries created in the healthcare area, and they will all need space because you cannot do medical research from home. You need labs,
yes.
right? And those labs are very specialized. So here's what I'm predicting, that you're going to see a lot of offices are going to basically change hands in Q3 and Q4 because they got hit. And people like me might actually buy these offices and convert them into life sciences and medical offices. We think that's an incredible, incredible profit-making opportunity. So keep in mind, when there's blood in the water, there's sharks around. When there's blood in the water, there's huge amounts of opportunity. I love repeating one of Warren Buffett's favorite sayings. Boy, he has lots of favorite sayings, but one that said is, when people are greedy, be fearful. When people are fearful, be greedy. Now, I'm not saying today is the time to be greedy. I'm saying Q3 is your time to be greedy. So Q2, the world is in flux, but in Q3, I think there's definitely time to be greedy. So I'm not going to cover cell towers and data centers because they're very, very small portions of the real estate economies, and we'll move on. And we'll finish off with the stock market, right? So here are some of the companies that are in trouble. Now, some of these may be buys. My particular favorite is right here, Royal Caribbean International. I'm a huge fan of their newest level of ships. They have 4 of them, including Spectrum of the Seas and Oasis of the Seas. I think that those are phenomenal ships. My research indicates that after previous pandemics like SARS and MERS, the cruise line traffic bounced back within months, which is why I think Royal Caribbean stock should not be down 78%. Once again, I'm not a stock advisor. You know, take your own risks. But some of the stocks here have been beaten down too much. I don't think Starbucks needs to be beaten down that much. And I certainly don't think that Walt Disney, with their incredible portfolio, should have been beaten down that much. So I just think that there's deals here that are phenomenal. One that I don't see on this page that has been beaten down is Lululemon. It's an incredible stock that I'm looking at myself. So there's some crazy deals here. And if you believe that the airline industry will come back, then every single airline right now is a phenomenal deal. So I do think that you are seeing opportunity here that you really didn't have access to until a few months ago. And then here
Apple,
are companies.
Apple there
Apple,
too. Think of all the people
right?
buying Apple and devices for their kids to be at home, to be,
Yep.
so that one's surprising as well.
That's very short term too in my mind.
Yeah,
But here are some of the companies that stand to gain, and some of these are short term gains, some of these are long term gains. I'll point those out. This webinar is being conducted through Zoom, which has seen an astonishing increase in their traffic and a huge number of people signing up. Slack, which is not on here, has seen 6,000 new customers in the last 2 weeks.
It's in the left-hand slide.
There it is.
There you go.
So Slack's seen 6,000 new customers, corporate customers, right? So that's not 6,000 people, that's 6,000 companies that have signed up in the last month and a half. And then there's short-term, benefits, right? So the retail industry, Costco, CVS, Walgreens, Dollar General, these are all seeing. I mean, I think their stock is cheap, but I do think that it's a short-term impact. What's not a short-term impact? I think Smith & Wesson, Remington, Sturm, Ruger, these are gun companies, and I think they're going to have a blowout Q2. They're going to have phenomenally high numbers. And so it may make sense to buy their stock before it goes back up, before the market goes back up. And again, if you're opposed to gun stocks, take a look at Grubhub and DoorDash, because I think that these companies, these delivery companies, they're signing on millions of brand new customers, and many of those customers are going to change their behavior. Other short-term winners, Electronic Arts, Activision, Zynga. EA's servers are crashing because the load on gaming servers is so high. And then companies that will benefit in the long run, Gilead Life Sciences, which is producing or working on vaccines, those are the sort of companies that can make an incredible, incredible amount of money. So there's a huge amount of opportunity in the marketplace, and I hope that you guys don't freeze. Please don't freeze. You already did that in 2009, right? And you suffered. Don't freeze again. So we're going to finish off with asset management. There's many of you are our investors, and they want to know what it is that we're doing. And the answer is we're doing everything we can. You know, remember that kitchen sink analogy that I had for the Federal Reserve?
Kitchen sink.
That's us. I mean, kitchen sink, that's where we are. Offensive. We're assessing community health. We're providing special resident services. We have these huge catalogs that we are building and shipping to our facilities that show every single kind of service, local, state, federal benefits that our residents can get. We're evaluating resident tenants to see which of our properties are more at risk. You know, just because their tenants work in areas like airports where infection rates are much higher, that could impact us. Or you know, a property where 30% or 40% of the people work in retail, you know, obviously we'll see more delinquency there. We're doing extremely aggressive leasing. We're offering massive numbers of discounts. We're taking pictures and videos of our properties so that we can do remote leasing. We know we're a protected sector. You guys know that multifamily is a protected sector, but that doesn't mean we're not going to see a decline in revenue in April and May and June. We are. We just want to get through it as well as we can. We're talking about, you know, delinquencies, right? And talking with tenants and giving them access to a number of different plans. So some of our communities, we're offering $75 coupons or kickbacks if they pay rent by the 1st of April, and I think we'll have strong uptake on that. So we're making every kind of offensive measure that we can while having a slew of defensive tactics. Our communities are effectively locked down. You can't go to the park. You can't go to the clubhouse. You can't go to the gym, right? We're even considering limiting access to laundries. So leasing offices are closed. Work orders are only being done if they're urgent. Unit turns are being reevaluated. Some places we're shutting down unit turns. We're preserving capitals. All unnecessary expenses are being cut down. We're not paying ourselves asset management fees, and we've stopped paying our investors cash flow at this point in time. We want to just hoard that cash in case something really bad happens. And we're talking to our lenders. We're talking to our lenders saying, look, we may not pay you mortgages in May. In April, we have no excuses, obviously, because we haven't seen any decline in revenue from March. So we can't do that in April. But in May, our vendors are expecting that we are going to, many of our apartment communities will choose to do forbearance, which means no payments for up to 90 days. And they're accepting of that. They understand that. So once again, I love being in a sector where before any damage can be done to me, remediation is already being provided. So far, we haven't lost a dollar. But there's all these people lining up to give money to our tenants, all these people lining up to give us forbearance before any damage can be done. I mean, truly real estate shines through this kind of emergency. It's obviously in 2008, the real estate sector caused the crash. But today, we see the sector shining, and we feel very strongly about the prospects of the sector, even though we do see some hard time coming over the next few weeks or months. And that's our presentation. Please note that this presentation changes every week. So when you see this presentation next week, don't think that it's the same presentation, because it's not. We're going to throw out all these slides and do a completely new presentation next week. In fact, our goal is not to have a single slide being repeated. That's kind of hard to do. Yeah. But when you see a new version of this presentation, at least 2/3 of the data slides will be new, and existing slides we will have updated the dates and the numbers on them. So keep coming back, because you need this information if you're going to make real estate decisions. Multifamilyu.com will have more webinars independent of this one on COVID. We're going to do a webinar series. I'm also throwing up a poll for you. Please answer that poll. And then This is the perfect time to ask questions.
Yes, but before we go into questions, I didn't hear you mention the word town hall.
That's right. Oh, I forgot. So, this obviously is a structured presentation. We've got content. So on Monday, we're doing a massive town hall, and we're bringing in industry experts. And the town hall, I believe, on Monday is at 3 p.m. Pacific.
That's correct.
There's 1,000 people registered for the town hall at this point in time. So if you are interested in a free-flowing discussion with experts talking about what happens to rents, what happens if our tenants don't pay, what are some of the tactics that we should be using. It's definitely more of a real estate conversation, though we'll be talking about the economy, but it's definitely more focused on single family and multifamily and commercial real estate. If you're interested in that, please sign up now, because it unquestionably will get sold out, or it's fully subscribed. We only allow 1,200 people, and we're close to 1,000 people at this point in time. So check out the multifamily town hall. I think as good as this event is, having 4 presenters there with 4 different viewpoints is going to be absolutely phenomenal. So we hope to see you at 3 p.m. Pacific on Monday, and Anna is going to be the moderator for that town hall. So that's going to be a very fun event.
And contributing my 2 cents as well.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I get to talk in that one. So
Anna is more like $2, but that's okay.
So yeah, I'm in the trenches with the asset management. So it's a real wild ride right now, but I feel very proud of the work that our company's doing with our residents and with our property managers. I feel that we're all being very empathetic to our residents and our staff. We're very careful with our residential staff, because they're important to our livelihood as well. So in fact, what I want to do, I know some people were asking about what do we do about rents, and I found a great resource today, and I'm just going to put a link into the chat for you. It's from NMHC, and it's suggestions on how to communicate with residents about rent, and it's got some great information in it. So I just posted that link for everybody.
Yep. So look at chat.
Let's start answering some questions, Neal. Several people are asking the question about inflation and hyperinflation. When we pump $2 trillion into the economy at this time, what are the risks of inflation?
So, macroeconomics has changed so much in the last 10 or 15 years because of what we saw in 2008 and what we are seeing again today. The vast majority of economists now believe that as long as the economy has subpar growth, it's extremely difficult to have any inflation. As you know, the Fed has been fighting disinflation, or inflation that's too low, below their acceptable levels. And at no point in this entire recovery has inflation hit a consistent level above 3%. So what we've seen is that as the world economy slows, and right now slow is not the right word, it's shut down, it is very unlikely that we will see either inflation or hyperinflation as something that we have to fight. In the long run, everyone knows that we are going to create hyperinflation with these trillions of dollars that are being injected into the world economy today. Our Fed is not the only one doing this. Other Federal Reserves are injecting trillions. And yes, there is an inflationary effect of that, but we do not see that playing a role in Q3, Q4, or 2021. Down the road, we all know that there's a price to pay for inflating.
Let's see. So in California, the number of cases don't look as bad as other places. How much of this do you feel is due to under-testing?
We saw a big spike yesterday in California. So the previous 3 or 4 days before that, it was in the 15 to 20% daily growth rate. And then it spiked yesterday to a significant, close to a 30% daily growth rate. So we are seeing sporadic testing in California. But here's what I can tell you. People are now moving away from counting the number of people infected, because we don't know which state is testing what percentage of its population, right? So that's a really bad way of looking at it. What people are doing now is looking at the percentage of people that are infected in a state, right, that are being counted, and then looking at the percentage of hospitalizations, because there's no evidence that California, for some reason, has much healthier people than, let's say, Washington State. Right? So it averages out at a state level. So if people are being hospitalized, we know what's happening. And so based on hospitalization data, I can tell you that California is doing better than other states, vastly better than New York. The only state that at this point is doing better than California is Washington State, because they started very early with their lockdowns.
Do you know how the mortgage forbearance would work if that were requested? So when would one have to pay that back?
That is not clear. Actually, that's something that we are trying to clarify. So I'm hopeful that I'll have a better answer for you in the town hall. But in past mortgage forbearance programs, including 2008, that money didn't have to be repaid. It was actually added to the end of your mortgage term. So if you had a 10-year mortgage, you could have basically didn't have to pay it for 10 years. Are they going to do it this time? We don't know. They're still writing the regs. Keep in mind, no one can really apply for that forbearance until May, because you have to first show proof that you are hit. They don't just allow you to come on in and say, hey, yeah, sure, yeah, let's do forbearance. They're like, okay, show us your P&L statement from February and show it to us for April. We want to see that there's real damage done that you cannot afford, and then we'll give you forbearance. So they've got some time and they're still working on it. I think that they're going to be reasonable about it.
I noticed some of your properties, one of which is under construction, have short-term rentals, which are getting decimated at the moment. Curious about your long-term prospects for short-term rentals.
We made sure that when we went through the planning for that particular property, that we were not required to have a single short-term rental. So we started off with the city saying 40 units out of 240 have to be short-term rentals. But as we went through the process, we were able to convince them that that is not required. Now, if the industry comes back 2 years from now when that project is built, sure, we'll have short-term rentals, but we don't have any such requirements at all.
Right, and for neither, that's Coyote Creek as well as Mesa. And
That's right.
both projects were underwritten to make sure that if they were executed as long-term rentals, completely long-term rentals with no short-term rentals involved as well at all, those are the numbers that were projected to investors. No, the numbers were not projected as if we do short-term rentals, this is what you could make. We backed it. Mesa was projected both ways and backed down, so they were both equal. And Coyote Creek was only projected as long-term rentals.
That's right. One of the things that is being asked that I want to point out is the link for the town hall has now been added by Anna. So please take, if you don't know, click on the link and you'll immediately see that this is a powerful event, because we included the content of the town hall on the landing page, like all the questions that we're going to ask. And these are really powerful questions because they come from you. You're the ones that have been bombarding us with questions. We're just putting them all together and saying, we're going to spend 90 minutes talking about this, right? And we're going to go into depth, which you cannot do in a webinar type presentation. So you've got a link, please click on it. I think that, to be honest, in about 5 minutes, we will hit our 1,200 person limit.
I think
so because there was only about 200 or 300 seats left, and there's 300 of you listening at this point in time. All right, let's keep going.
Okay, so for the multifamily projects, God forbid if the economic vacancy gets out of control and prices tank and properties go underwater and it's time to hand it back to the lender, how and when do you make that call? At a time it may not make sense to do good, to send good money after bad money. How do you make the call to walk off from underwater projects?
I think multifamily being a fairly protected sector and being a need-based sector, not a want-based sector, I don't think it's good money after bad. I think that if you fight through Q2 and you fight through Q3, I don't think you're going to be going under. So, I mean, the only reason why you would go under in Q4 is going to be mismanagement. Now, I'm expecting there to be a significant amount of properties coming to market. In the last 2 years, we've had a huge number of wannabe syndicators that have been able to gather money and buy properties at ridiculous prices. And some of those properties, unfortunately, have no operating expenses. They don't have an operating budget, unlike our properties where some of our properties we can run without rent for a year. So the key is that it will happen. But assuming that you're competent and you're not mismanaging the property, there's no concept of good money after bad here. I'm pretty confident here.
Let's see. So going back through these, do you recommend buying the stocks, long-term stocks you stated, such as Storm and Roger, given that it's already low right now in Q3 and Q4, or buying them now?
The stock market reacts much faster than real estate. I'm suggesting that for the most part, it makes sense to buy, real estate in Q3, but stocks would have recovered by then. If stocks haven't recovered by Q3, I'm not
Yeah,
sure
we're
we're
not.
going to have an
Yeah,
economy.
exactly. Yeah. Have you given any consideration to raising a fund to have capital on hand for Q3 and Q4 deals rather than having doing, I guess, single syndications? Given the uncertainty in the market, sellers will likely be more concerned with certainty to close, shorter DD periods, et cetera, than securing the absolute highest price.
I'm considering doing that. But the problem is right now we have a lot of investors who are freaked out. They're beginning to realize that the benefits of having blood in the water. But I want to make sure that first I can unfreeze my investor base before I open a fund.
For when would you start buying? So when will this Q3 start? When do you start buying?
When the dust settles. And if the answer is what does that mean, Neil? The answer is, how can I possibly know that? You have a true black swan event. We're in the middle of it. We don't know when it actually stops. And so I don't know the answer to that. So my speculation is that we'll be buying in Q3, but certainly not in Q2.
So can someone refinance property using the 350B COVID relief?
I don't believe so.
There's another comment that some mortgage servicers like SPS are automatically enrolling you into forbearance for 3 months with only a phone call and no paperwork. So everybody, you should be looking into options given your specific real estate investment loans as well as your home mortgage.
We haven't heard that yet, but that is news to us. Could you please,
I heard
in the chat box?
I did hear that before.
Got it.
From somebody
Can you
else on
chat
Facebook.
more? Yeah, can you give us more information about that in the chat box? We can use
That's
that for Monday's town hall.
That's from Michelle Swinnick. So
Got
Michelle, if you could give us some more information in the chat box, or you could follow up in an email to Neal and Anna at grocapitus.com. Let's see. What about Sweden? Their economy is open with no plans of lockdown.
So the short answer is firstly, Sweden's a much less dense economy than the US. Comparing a large economy like the US with Sweden is not an apples to apples comparison, but keep in mind, you need to do your research. It's not that Sweden's economy is open. They do have severe restrictions, but they've got a more compliant audience. So the Japanese, the Swedes, the Singaporeans, the South Koreans seem to be much more compliant. Americans seem to relish in showing up at beaches in the middle of a lockdown. Why compare ourselves to them?
Given the tight real estate market in San Francisco, what would be your guess of the decline in real estate prices you think we're likely to see for condos and single family homes? And what do you also think about decline in rents that we might see?
So we might see a small decline in rents and prices. I think we're going to see a very substantial decline at the high end of the market in San Francisco, but the mid and low end should hold. And the biggest reason for that is, keep in mind, who is buying homes in the San Francisco Bay Area? Do you think that any person that works in retail buys a home in the San Francisco Bay Area? Do you think that any person that works in a hotel buys a home in the San Francisco Bay Area? No. It's technologists. None of them are losing their jobs. So I can't imagine a very strong effect in the San Francisco Bay Area. The high end is going to get hit.
Yeah. I agree with your plan to be ready to strike and invest in Q4. What is your suggestion of what to do with the cash in the meantime?
We will still have projects running that are not affected by this. Oddly enough, and this is bizarre even as I say it, new construction is not affected much.
No.
Firstly, more and more states are saying it's an essential activity. So we still have new construction going on in states that have lockdown. Secondly, our new construction interest rates are still phenomenal. I mean, they're higher at this point. We have a new construction project that we're doing where we're getting a 4.75% construction loan. And because a significant amount of construction activity is slowed down, labor is plentiful and materials are plentiful. So we're doing new construction projects because there is no impact for COVID to a product that doesn't deliver for 2 years. That's what I'm going to be doing between now and Q3, Q4. We've got to wait for existing inventory to come to the market. I'm not buying anything that's existing inventory at this point in time because it doesn't make sense. Unless it's public storage. Obviously, public storage doesn't seem to have been affected.
We're looking at self-storage, that we don't have a slowdown on that. That is that asset classes doing okay right now.
Mm-hmm.
I have a mixed use class A deal under contract. We still have time to get out without losing earnest money. The sellers are willing to extend closing date by 60 to 120 days. Do you suggest continuing on until we hit our DD deadlines or just back out now?
Back out now. I want to be very blunt, and I want you to hear the bluntness in my my voice. I'm sorry, not my wife. Voice. That was funny. Back out now.
If my property has necessary repairs, would you defer the repairs at this time?
Yes, absolutely. Don't repair, please.
Yeah. Are you still offering courses to learn and prepare ourselves for Q3 and Q4 buy time?
Absolutely. We're going back to the e-bootcamp format. So our bootcamp in Seattle in Q2 is canceled and has been converted into an e-bootcamp. I have to emphasize this. This is a phenomenal time for new syndicators to get in. For 4 or 5 years, you've been making excuses saying everything's too expensive. Well, you certainly can't say that about Q3, can you? This is a great time to get in.
Yeah, but you need the knowledge of how to get in, how to analyze the data. You know, so that's what you learn from our boot camp is how we do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see, Neal, do you see any others out there that you want to jump on? We're just about at time, so I'm going to give you a choice.
Yeah. You know, there were 2 questions, one from Marlene, one from Matt. One was telemedicine. How will it impact demand for medical offices? Honestly, it's very difficult to say if telemedicine is going to have a significant impact once this ends. People like going to doctors. I like going to my doctor, and I don't think that telemedicine is going to have a long-term impact. I see it being short-term. Then high tuition universities will have a big blowback, more remote online learning. Same comment. We don't know if that's going to be long-term or short-term. Going to college is an experience. I don't see how going to college online is an experience. So my son goes to college, and I think more than the education, the experience, the learning that comes with being with people is important to him. I don't see that changing, Marlene.
Yeah, my daughter's applying for graduate school, actually in a master's in public health. And she is being told that classes are expected to go on live in the fall. And this
Yep.
is in Seattle. So I think that schools are going to take it as it comes, but they do plan on not being completely remote in the fall.
And Dimitri, yes, you will get the slides because an email will go out with the video and there'll be a button there for the slides. So, but keep in mind, slides this week, maybe junk next week. So we're making our predictions, and it really changes each week. So we're hopeful that you'll come back next Friday for our next webinar, whenever it is that we do this webinar again.
We do this one again. We will be doing town halls as well as repeating this one, but with the updated data. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Perfect. All right. Thank you, everyone. Hundreds of you showed up and stayed until the end. We appreciate your time, and please stay safe out there or in there.
All right. Be well, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.